Last week we had a big showing. I think we had between 30 and 40 people online. I had another 10, 15 people here in the class, which we fully recorded. All of the information needed to go through the newest documents. And I did go onto floridarealtors.org or .com.org, and there's nothing new. No new biggies, but there is something I did want to point out, and this is something we have to get out to all of our agents that have a listing. If you have an active listing right now with an older contract, what they're asking for is us to incorporate this form. This is a compensation disclosure agreement, and basically it has a singular statement on it that shows this: notice to the buyer, seller, or owner, brokerage compensation is not set by law, it's fully negotiable. So this is one of those follow-up documents. It's already in .loop. It's called the Compensation Disclosure Statement, CDS-1. So if you have anything, which is reminds me, make note of that. I got to do that for me to do that because I have a listing. So, okay. I wanted to review a few things during this session. We can certainly review if we want, if anybody needs to review any of the particular documents. And I'll say review in that you've already either taken the class or watched the video in full. And the other thing that I want to do is have some conversations. So I still have agents I'm having singular conversations with, and I wanted to open up this forum for the opportunity to say, okay, let's do some role playing. Let's do some, I don't necessarily have any scripting, but I know over the last several weeks as we've been preparing for this, we've had a lot of conversations about that. So let's get into that. Now, Daniel, you've joined us. I think you in particular were kind of coming in going, I want to be prepared. I got to talk to a buyer. How do I present this now buyer broker agreement to my buyer? So anybody have anything before I keep, blah, 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 on? Anybody have anything they want to share in regards to that? So I can tell you that when we go in now, so it used to be some of the agents in the past used buyer broker agreements, and it was always, hey, blame it on the broker, right? And my broker requires this as our due diligence, and that way, if they were giving you pushback, you wouldn't have to use. You wouldn't have to use it. It was just, you'd have to read the flags of the individual. Now you're going in and everybody has to sign a buyer broker agreement. How is that going to work? If somebody's looking at you going, you know what, I don't want to sign an agreement, and you're going to have the conversation that says, well, whether you work with me or any other agent in the United States, you will be required to sign a buyer broker agreement. There are, right now there's two, I believe, two possibilities where you will not have to have somebody sign a buyer broker agreement. The first one is if you're holding an open house. MLS has stated that if you're holding an open house, you're working for a seller. If somebody wants to make an offer and you want to put a little document in there and said, this is what I'm doing, and the sellers are already doing the compensation anyway, then you're good to go. You might want to just kind of slide that paperwork in there and have it taken care of. And the second one is your own listing. Right now, the MLS is saying that if you have somebody call you specifically to ask you to see your listing, you do not have to have a buyer broker agreement. Right? So, by the way, that is all. I spent a good part of a day earlier this week going through this. This is a This is a printout of the frequently asked questions that are on the MLS. So you can go in, there's a section in the MLS that has FAQs for all this NAR settlement stuff. And what you see on the screen or what it prints out are two different things. They're all color coded and broken down by section. And so it really will behoove you to make sure that you go through that for your own sake. Because there's a lot, I mean, everything's in there. Everything we need to know is in what we taught last week and what's in here now. So I got a call yesterday from an agent who said, you know, Mr. Dion, I got a buyer, and well, what happens if they don't want to sign that big document, right? So let me do a share screen real quick, and let's go into our buyer brokers agreements. So if you create a buyer loop now and you name it, you know, with the buyer's name, you don't specifically have a property you're working on yet. So you put it in the buyer's name. You can always put in the property address. You can go back and edit this anytime. You have an exclusive buyer brokers agreement, but you've also got these secondary. So you got these other two documents. The other one, the third one down here is just a retainer. And you know what? If all you want to do is just have me drive you around showing you houses, I can do that for a fee, right? And you can collect a retainer. These other exclusive buyer broker agreements, that is the big one. And this is the most comprehensive of all the agreements. And maybe you have a buyer that doesn't want to sign, you know, 3 pages of, you know, oh my God, what's all this fine print? You have a showing agreement, where for maybe an amount of time, you're going to be showing specific properties. You've got them all listed out. You can put the properties in here and just make it attributed to those properties. And it talks about, you know, the purchase, your compensation here in section 5, your percentages and stuff. And still, again, if they don't want to sign the 2-page document, you do have a prospective buyer retainer agreement. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. You have a pre-touring agreement where you can just say, okay, before I show you any homes, here's some basic information, and whether you're paying a flat fee or a percentage of the purchase price or what have you. Again, this is just a lighter version. So conversations, let's talk about that. Terry, be my buyer, and you're coming to me, and you're starting your home search, and of course we're having the conversations about pre-qualification. You're already speaking to you know, your lender. Marie's right here. She can join in the meeting if we have to have a conversation with your lender, your pre-qualification. And I'm sending you stuff on the MLS. I got an MLS auto email stuff you've been looking at, and you flagged a few. You want to go show a few. So, hey, Terry, I see you got a couple of houses you've shown interest in. You want to go see them?
Absolutely. I'm excited about a couple of these.
Excellent. Terry, there's something I have to go over with you. This is relatively new in the industry. I will tell you that these particular agreements that I'm going to be reviewing with you have been around for a while. However, only recently has it come down where they're absolutely required. I and every other real estate agent in the United States needs to have a written agreement between a buyer and myself or themselves before we go see any properties. It's a law now. If I don't do it, I get in trouble. And by the way, this is nationwide. So what I'd like to do is go over the agreement with you and address any concerns you might have and questions you might have.
I've never had to do this before. What?
Yeah.
I don't understand. I'm supposed to sign something before we even go look at a property?
So Terry, have you been watching the news lately? You might have seen some headlines fly across your screen about the new NAR settlement, DOJ, some other lawsuits that have been going on, Sitzer Barnett. It's been everywhere, even mainstream media, CNN, CBS. Have you seen anything like that fly by?
I haven't been paying attention to it because we didn't start, thinking about searching for properties until last week.
Well, that's
So-
true. And, we probably could have had this conversation a lot sooner. But, I wanted to make sure that, we were comfortable with each other. I wanted to, make sure that this is something you wanted to do before I had to throw this at you. So what has happened is the Department of Justice came down and they dinged in the National Association of Realtors. And apparently there's a lot of realtors out there that haven't really been clear and concise and open with their buyers and sellers. And so now what they've done is they're saying that everybody has to have a written agreement up front. So the agreement pretty much states that, and I can go over it with you, but it pretty much states that I'm going to be working with you to help you find a home, and that you understand that as we look at homes, you need to be clear and concise on where my compensation's coming from. In the past, the conversation would be going like this. Hey, Terry, I'm going to go show you a house. And at some point, you might ask, what's this going to cost me? And I'm going to look at you and go, well, actually, it'll cost you the broker's fee of $845 because that's separate from my commission. But I'm putting you on mute, Alan. So in the past, when we talked about that, commissions it just came from the seller. Don't worry, the seller's going to pay my commission. Well, Terry, that's not going to be the case all the time. Although a lot of the homes out there for sale are still offering buyer broker commissions, it's possible that they might not be. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. We're going to be looking at homes that are going to meet all your needs. I want to make sure that all the homes we're seeing are going to meet all your needs. Now, I know you've been working with pre-qualification. We're going to have to make sure that we find a home that's going to meet your concessions, right? So we have to find a seller that's willing to pay some of your concessions for closing costs and prepaids. We had that conversation with Marie yesterday. And the other thing we're going to make sure of is that we're going to find a seller that's going to make sure that they cover our costs too. But here's the thing. I want you to understand the value of what I'm bringing to the table, because a lot of people at this point will go, you know what, I might as well just go, I'm just going to go to another source and I'll just look and find one on my own. This is what buyer brokers do for you. Buyer brokers will help you negotiate the best price for your deal. So we do comps. Before we even put in an offer, I'm going to be doing comparables to make sure that we're getting a good price. Make sure that the house isn't overpriced, you're getting a good deal. We're going to be making sure that the additional terms that we have, all the concessions in place, making sure we're looking out for all your best interest, because contracts don't have all the specific things that we're looking for. Clear title, clear HOAs, making sure your concessions are written up right. Making sure that when we get under contract that we're going to help you manage this project, so that we're working alongside with you to get your escrow in. We're going to be working with you to get through your inspections, all the way to closing. And if anything comes up, we're there to negotiate every step of the way. If anything were to come up in any of those key points in closing a contract. In addition to that, for working with me, I actually have a working relationship with a gentleman that works with our company. He's actually in our disclosure documents. He's going to come in, and when you buy your new home, if you so choose, he can update, or if it doesn't have one, which most homes actually have a security system in here in their homes now, he will actually update your entire security system in the house. New keypad, everything, all digital, Wi-Fi compatible. You can hook it up to your Alexa if you want, and cover your first 6 months of premiums, monitoring premiums, which I think run between $30 and $40 a month, depending on what your plan is. He's going to do that for zero cost. That's about $3,600 in value. And then I'm going to pay for the other 6 months. So for 5 years of monitoring, you're going to only have to pay for 4. It's a great service. And let's face it, everybody in Florida, they have security systems. So as we work closely together, as we get through all this, I want to ensure you're going to get the best value as a realtor. and so that you understand what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be working together to minimize your costs. I don't want you to be afraid. So we're going to go through this line by line. I want to make sure you're clear and understand all of the pieces of the agreement before we move forward. Does that sound good?
So, all right.
Yeah.
Pause. there was a lot of stuff there. All right. So I'm going to throw in 2 cents before we go any further with any of this part. So there was a lot of good stuff in what Alan was saying there. And I think because this was what was going on my side of things as Alan was trying to build his value, was all the different reasons why this is crazy. What the heck are you trying to say? What does this actually mean? No, I'm not signing a document before you take me to a property. So one of the things that we need to be thinking about right now is what things are they going to say as a comeback, as an issue that we're going to have to deal with.
Objections.
We need some kind of response to those objections, right?
Yes.
And so whenever you were going through the point of it used to be that the seller paid for everything, and I'm wondering if one approach to this, and by the way, guys, this is an all of us discussion. This isn't just Terry and Alan. So jump in, give your feedback. If you've had any of these interactions yet, this is a time to bring it out, to share, etc. But one of the things that I was thinking about is kind of flipping the script a little bit, in that technically the buyers always paid their commission. They're the ones that are bringing the money to the transaction to begin with. And so if that house was $500,000, they were having to get a loan on that $500,000, and that $500,000 loan, a piece of that was turned around and put back into the commission and paying for that agent. So I think part of this conversation is a flipping of the script. We have to, find positives in this, is that it's really always been that way. It's always just been portrayed, as we know, that the seller, the broker, is getting the money, and then it's paying for those kind of things. But it's really the buyer that's been, because we're talking about disposition, and the buyer's the one that brings the money to the transaction anyway. So really, whenever you've borrowed the money in the past to buy a home, you've actually paid the agent's commission. All we're doing here is taking down the walls and make it very clear that there's two agents involved. I'm going to be working for you. I'm going to be representing you. And we need to clarify how I'm going to get paid in this transaction. And then of course you're building that value, which you were doing. You were spending a lot of time building the value, but I felt like there probably would have been a lot of different things that person on the other side would have said before you got to any of that.
That's true.
As soon as you started talking about the paper, you kind of jumped into that, and I was like, oh, they'd have stopped you.
And that's fine. So at that point, you pull out the paper, you pull out the form, and go, okay, let's just go through this so that you have a clear understanding. And please understand this: regardless of where you go, anywhere in the United States, and right now we're in Florida, so all realtors are expected to and required to put this form in place. So it's, in the past, it was only an agreement. Like, for instance, if you were going to sell your house, we'd be sitting and I'd be going through, how we're going to list your house and all of the things that we're going to do to make sure we get top dollar for your house, the things to make it more saleable, and share those ideas. And you're going to get my value that way. And then we're going to sit down. We have a listing agreement. This is how it's going to work out. Now, what the real estate industry is requiring is, beyond just having a listing agreement, we have to have a buying agreement. So when we sit down together, we're having this conversation. It's really the same type of conversation. I mean, we've already had good conversations. I've helped you get pre-qualified. I've helped you through all the steps up this far. And it's just that by law, just like I can't put your house on the MLS without a listing agreement, I cannot show you a home without a buyer's agreement. And so that's really what it's coming down to. And that's regardless of where you go. Somebody's going to have this form or a variation of it with all of the same components on it that you're still going to have to sign. So the problem is only in that it's new. It's new to a lot of buyers because the focus has been on sellers with the lawsuits, things of that sort. And now it'll be interesting as we move forward and work together to see how this goes with buyers all across the nation and the type of feedback that's going to be coming in, things of that sort. But I want you to be comfortable with me. I want you to work with me, and we've got a great rapport. I'd like to build on that. So let's sit down. Let's go over the document. If you have any questions or concerns, we could just take one of them one at a time. Sound fair?
Absolutely.
Awesome. And so at that point, if you taken part in the training or watched the video, basically you're going to come down to the point where it's like, okay, here's my fee. This is what I typically get paid on a home like this. And this is where the rubber meets the road for us, because for us, we took whatever was available. So I'm going to show you homes, and we're showing homes, and whatever was in the MLS, that's what we knew we were getting paid. It was anywhere from 2 to 3% in general. Only in the last couple of years, we've had some ridiculously flat rates, $1,000 commissions or whatever like that. So, and I think it was not that long ago, it was like 18 months ago or so, that we actually saw a commission of $0. Or I think it was $1. And in the realtor remarks, it was like, it was already stated right out that the buyer is going to have to pay their own buyer broker's commission. So although it hasn't been mandated, this practice has started to hit us. And now it's required. Sellers don't have to offer anything to put it in the MLS. And so I need to ensure I get paid. You need to ensure that, and I'm going to help you with this, that we find the right home for you that's going to meet all your needs, for your family, all the needs that we discussed, the areas that we're looking for, that are not just, the house, but they offer your needs financially. So we're going to look for homes that are offering seller concessions, that are offering help with your closing costs and prepaids, and that will help with my fee as well. Now, for me, and this is going to be different for every agent, because, when we've gone to listing agreements, so this is as an aside, we're talking to you guys on the screen and in the audience, when we do listings, we kind of have to work with the customers to figure out what they want to be, where their net is, how much they owe, right? And then we get to that point where it's like, well, this is what I charge. And it's in Florida, because we have probably the largest number of realtors per capita. It gets very competitive. So I hear other sections of the country, it's like everybody's paying 6%. And I'm in Florida, I'm like, people are paying anywhere from 4 to 6%. I haven't seen anyone in Florida charge a 7%, but not yet. That being said, when I bought my first house back in 1990 something, mid 90s, I paid $85,000 for an REO. And, my broker, I had a buyer broker then, and I didn't know it was a new thing, but here he was, and he made his 2 to 3% of $85,000. So, what are we talking about? $85,000, we're talking about $1,600, $1,700 for commission. Now we're expecting that hasn't changed, and we're collecting 6% from a seller and divvying that up. But on a $500,000 home now, it's $30,000. And I know we've had inflation, and those numbers are great to us. But I had an agent come into my office a while ago, and he was upset because he had a buyer wanted to buy this house, and they were only offering 2%. And I'm like, well, what's wrong? So 2, I get it. 2 is low. 2 is like, but I stopped and I says, how much is the house for, and he said it was like over 500, low fives, right? 500 something thousand. I'm like, well, that's 10 grand in your pocket. You got a problem with that? And he was like, well, no, not if you put it that way. Okay, it's the same paperwork, whether you're doing $100,000 house or $1 million house. It's literally the same paperwork. So why can't we be competitive? And I think that's the key. Everybody is kind of looking at this going, ooh, now I got to justify myself. I got to talk to the gentleman in front of me and say, hopefully I built a good enough rapport where they're going to be like, yeah, I'll pay you whatever. You're worth it. But in those instances when they're not, in those instances where you've gotten a lead off of Op City or maybe one of our own here, and so they're fairly new and they want to go see a house right away, then you're going to have this conversation with them and let them know up front. And so the conversation, without having the opportunity to build that rapport, you're going to have to take those minutes up front. And even if you meet at the house, before you go in that house, you have to have the paperwork with you. So the sooner you have the conversation with your potential buyer, the better. Kamisha, did you just raise your hand?
No, that was the next one. That's it.
Somebody just raised their hand?
That's right.
Well, I don't.
That's me.
Nesway, there you are. You shifted on my screen. All of a sudden you were there. Oh, I see it. Okay. Yes, Nesway.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I have a question about the builders. How's gonna be work with the builders? When you go to some place, is builder, we need to show an agreement or not?
You don't now. It's not required. They don't. The only people that are policing us are the MLS. So a listing agent may ask you for one. You better have one. But most listing agents aren't going to trouble themselves with that. And the same thing with new home construction. If you're going and showing a home, new home or whatever, you're going to have to have a buyer broker agreement signed and with you.
Okay.
Now, this is interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I have another, hold on, I got some comments here real quick before I move forward. I want to make sure I'm getting all these. Oh, cool. Terry's throwing in objections that we can cover. Thank you, Terry, being proactive. Terry, you know, Terry's got his chat GPT going off on the other screen, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so where we, oh, new home builders, right. So I have, that's going to be very important that you have a conversation with your buyers. And, you know, many of us have been burned by this where we're working with a buyer and all of a sudden they just go visit a new home construction company and they get signed in and registered without you. And next thing you know, the builder is cutting you out. We've always had to educate our buyers to let them know that if you register with a new home builder without me, I don't get compensated. This kind of opens the door for that because if you're showing them homes, it's even more important to let them know that you need to be with them before they register with any new home builders. Because what will happen is not all new home builders, actually no new home builders right now, are going to honor the buyer broker agreement. And what I mean by honor, it means that they don't care we have one. What they'll do is they'll try to sell you a house and then you're going to have to come out of pocket from cash and you're going to have to pay me our agreed upon funds. That's not what we're intending to do here. We don't want that. So this is going to be part of the conversation. If you have somebody looking at new homes and or resales, if you're going to be showing them homes, if you're going to be touring them, then you've got to have a buyer broker agreement in place. Now, interestingly enough, the MLS states that you only have to have a buyer broker agreement in place with homes that are listed in the MLS. And you might say, well, these particular homes for this builder aren't, but they might be. And, you know, FSBOs aren't necessarily either, but because, you know, for sale by owners is an awful great place to go if the MLS is looking a little thin and you're trying to find somebody, you know, outside of that marketplace off listing, off books that might need the needs of your buyer. I will tell you, just always have a buyer broker agreement in place. Just do it. Don't try to beat around it. Don't try to like, oh, I don't need it for this. Except again, if you get a phone call from somebody who just saw the for sale sign in your front yard and wants you to show it directly. Great. But if they want to see the house across the street, well, now you got to have something in writing. Hey, while I'm here, can you show me this house over here or this one down the street? I can, but here's the deal. Okay. So something I do want to review with everybody here again. I did go over this in the video, but this is going to be part of our scripting where you're going to create a buyer's loop and you're going to be looking at the others, right? So it might be easier to open up your conversation with a smaller, shorter document for a shorter amount of time. So this one might be, hey, I'm going to work with you for 30 days and just so we can feel each other out, get comfortable. Or maybe the guys in town, they're only flying in for a week. And so you can make this very limited for a time frame and then, agree if you find something, this is what I'm going to charge you. That's the pre-touring agreement. It's a single page. You can have some blank ones in your briefcase. So if you're out in the field, you get a phone call to show a house, you got something quick and dirty to put in place. And you can let them know that this is just for touring. If we go into contract, that's a conversation that you want to have with them. Hey, this is all commissions are negotiable. You don't owe the broker any commission at this time. That kind of puts them at comfort. But if you wish to work with the broker to purchase property, broker shows you broker's compensation for services are as follows. So this kind of still puts it out there, but it's a much smaller document. And then oddly enough, the showing agreement's been around for quite some time. Showing agreement's a little bit more comprehensive. It's 2 pages instead of 1. And you could just put specific properties on it and, a specific time frame. And you still have to talk about your fees. And, Terry, we're going to be looking at homes. Rest assured, we're going to be making sure that we find a home that's the least impact on your pocket. And so, Terry, you might ask me, what happens if I fall in love with this home, but the seller's not offering any concessions? Well, first of all, if the seller's not offering concessions, based on what the lender has said, that's going to be a no-go. That's going to be a no-go for you. We're not looking for homes like that. That doesn't meet your financial needs. Now, you might say, well, I talked to my lender. We made a few adjustments. Turns out I don't need any concessions. I'm just worried about your fee. Well, you know what? Everything's negotiable. So what I'll do is I'll have a conversation with the listing agent. A lot of times I see this one's been on the market for about 90 plus days. So maybe the seller's willing to cover some of your costs, and we can work it that way. So let me have a conversation and get back with you. Right? That's how we'll handle it.
So just to highlight that, guys, everything that Alan just said in the last 2 minutes, I think is the most important part we've heard of this discussion so far, because that is definitely going to come up. You are definitely going to have to come up with that conversation. That needs to definitely be one of your answers that you have in your pocket. And I think the lenders, and our lenders specifically, also need to be aware of these conversations that we're having so they can prepare themselves to help hold the transaction together as much as we are going to need to.
Right. So Terry's been busy punching in objections. I don't want to sign anything. I completely understand your hesitation. He says the agreement simply formalizes our working relationship. There's no that's key, right? it simply formalizes our relationship. And of course, you can reword this any way you like or not use it at all. This is what we're here for, to give everybody ideas on conversations that could possibly happen. But it ensures that I can represent your best interests throughout the home buying process. Before I go further in that, there are variations in your, when you create a loop, we are all by default still transaction brokers, so that in any essence we can actually represent both sides of the contract, because both sides of the contract, the sale, because we represent the contract. We represent the transaction. Sorry, not each individual. However, there are single agent forms. So you can go in your dot loop, and instead of using the one that I have here, exclusive buyer broker agreement transaction broker, or the TV, you can actually do the single agent, and you can have the conversation with them that indeed, yes, you can have a fiduciary relationship with them. That means you are truly representing their best interest. Keep in mind that if they decide they want to see another house or home listed with another Maritime realtor, then you're going to have to transition back to transaction broker. So just keep that in mind. It also gives you the assurance that I'm fully committed, right? So we talked about that. There's no obligation to buy. And that's a key thing, because I'm working with an agent right now with a buyer who is trying to fight and get out of a buyer broker agreement because, quote unquote, we changed our mind, we're not going to buy a home. Great. I'll let you. You can change your mind. The buyer broker agreement does not require them to buy a home. And I think that's a key point. So if you're talking to an individual, make sure that that's clear. Because if they change their mind and don't want to buy a home, that's okay. You don't have to. But if you do buy a home, you've agreed to buy it with me under these circumstances, and I'm going to help you look, and we're going to get you under contract for the perfect home, and we're going to take care of all of this. All right? Now, this particular couple wants to get out of the contract because they started looking at new home construction, and somebody asked them if they had a buyer broker agreement, and although they'll deny this, the buyers who say they know nothing about real estate ask specifically for a release and cancellation. So we're going to be here for that. Some of you might have noticed on a WhatsApp this morning that I added Chris Minius, our resident attorney here, to our chat group. I told him be careful. Because, all of a sudden the Q&A will rise up. You better be prepared to handle it. But again, he's here for us, not necessarily our people. And I'm going to be sitting with Chris to go over the buyer broker's agreement to make sure that we have things in place should somebody start challenging our rights and our abilities to stand up to the contract. So
well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alan. You added him to the WhatsApp chat, so he was aware of some of the things that we were dealing with, some of the questions, not necessarily to bog him down to answering a bunch of questions.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. Not necessarily. I just want to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you. I've sent many an agent to him, and so
it's the WhatsApp legal chat.
That's right. And he'll answer your question for a fee. He only charges $50 a minute. I'm joking. But he's a good guy. Sorry. Any of you who have worked with him, he's kind of cool. He's done some stuff for us too. Objection number 2, I'm just browsing. I'm not ready to commit to anything yet. It's perfectly okay to browse. And I'm here to help at any stage of your home search, which might be, in those instances, maybe you want to use the one of the lighter agreements for just browsing, and then transition. Have that conversation that you want to transition to a more robust one that protects them as well as you in the near future. Should we get deeper into this and we go from browsing to whatever? You know, the other thing too, these buyer broker agreements, they have additional terms in them, and you can do, you know, you could set yourself up if you're having a conversation. You can do tiers. You know, for if I'm just showing you, I'll just show you homes and I'll do it for a flat fee. If we're going to write a contract, I can write the contract for you for the next level fee. And if you want me to do the whole ball of wax, here's tier 3, and we'll negotiate everything for closing. So in other words, you can pay me out of pocket for these things, or you can pay me, you know, we'll make arrangements so we can negotiate the best terms, so I get paid at closing from the other funds, from the closing funds. So, but it does allow me to fully assist you, providing access to more detailed information and guidance. It also ensures that if you do find the home you love, I can move quickly. Yeah, we want to move quickly. This is kind of the same conversation where, you know, have you been pre-qualified? Yeah, so you might show a home or two and they haven't been pre-qualified yet, and you let them know, it's like, here's the issue. If you love this house right now, we might have to wait and miss the opportunity because now you have to get in touch with a lender and go through the process of being pre-qualified. So you could miss an opportunity if you're not ready. This isn't quite that. I can't show you, I cannot open the door to that house unless unless we have a signed agreement. And that's the law. And that's the conversation a lot of times we're going to have to fall back on.
So as you're browsing through these objections and potential responses, a couple of the, especially when we get to like 7 and 8, the responses lean a little bit on something we don't know quite yet how it's going to pan out. For example, the you know, in most cases the seller's still going to offer compensation and take care of things that way. We don't really know how true that is at this point because it's not the 17th yet, and you know, so we will see how that pans out. We got to prepare for it either way, whether it's business as usual and most of the sellers are still offering a compensation, or it's a complete reversal and most of them aren't. You know, and I think that will be definitely to their detriment if they do it that way. But we got to be prepared for to adapt these conversations. So even though some of this slants a little bit to the expectation that the sellers in many cases will still offer compensation, that we have to be prepared for them not to, and we would reword these accordingly.
Absolutely. And, you know, in light of that, my train of thought just derailed.
I'm sorry, man.
No, it's all right. It's all right.
That's a monster drink you got there.
That's my monster drink. Yeah, it's almost gone. I'm freaking out. So, all right. Good input, Terry. Good. I'm looking at this third objection. I want to keep my options open and work with multiple agents. Response is good. I respect you want to explore, and I don't know if, you know, I don't know if I actually say this word for word, but, you know, the agreement's designed to ensure you have dedicated professionals who know. And, you know, okay, maybe, but really what it comes down to is these documents are to let you know that everything's negotiable. So let's talk about that. If they are working with multiple agents, and this has been a problem for all of us, which is another reason where I'm going to look at you and go, honestly, this protects me. And maybe that's the conversation you want to have with your buyer. It's like, you know what? I've been burned. I've had a lot of people out there and that I've worked with who spent weeks working with somebody, and they turn around and buy a house with somebody else who spent no time at all. And I get that. You want to keep your options open. What I can do for you, and what I'm willing to do for you, is confine it to an area. Generally, and I'll share this with you guys if everybody can see that. So generally, when you're looking at the EBB, the big one has the type of property and the location. So again, type of property, I put in residential. It could be, right? It could be residential, that which covers everything: single family home, condo, townhome, villa, whatever it is. It's a residential, as long that's 4 units and under. So even if they want to go to a dual, right, or a quad or unit or whatever, then you're still covered. Now let's talk about location. Tell you what, how about if you're looking in other locations around Florida? Obviously, I can't, help you out in the extremes. So what if I just limit it to the counties that we're working here in Central Florida? Does that sound agreeable? And so I would put Seminole, Orange, Lake, Sumner, Osceola, and Polk.
You changed that. Because I adapted exactly what you said. When you said to put Florida, because if you can't do it, you would refer them to somebody who can.
Well, you know what, and that's true. Thank you for reminding me. That does put us, well, under normal circumstances, I would put Florida.
Okay.
I would.
Yeah, me too.
Right. And then, I've decided to move to Tallahassee. Great. I'm going to find an agent for you up there, and we'll work it out, and I'll refer you out. And so now you get the referral agreement. This is a conversation where they're directly looking at you and go, yeah, but I've got somebody else helping me out in Tampa, and I'm looking out in Daytona. I got somebody else help me out in Daytona, and I'm happy to work with you in the Central Florida area. Great. And so that way you can just negotiate that down to, fine, let's just limit it to these counties, and we're good to go.
Yeah, and Alan, I like this part of the conversation, because keep in mind that part of the negotiation is something of this nature, and it's not always monetary. So yes, you might be working on the compensation percentage at part of this conversation, but also by having this other thing to negotiate, you can still work things out. So where you might have had a problem, you can bring in some of these other things that can be negotiated to get some yeses out of them, to kind of prepare them for the rest of the conversation.
Wow. Okay. Yes. Thank you, Terry. What if I don't like working with you after signing?
Too bad.
Well, I would certainly hope by now you've got a sense of who I am and how well we'd work together.
But still,
after we,
what if I don't like you?
After we sign, I don't turn into Mr. Hyde. My name is not Dr. Jekyll. And so I get that. But I will tell you that, if you believe that during the course of our working together that I've acted irresponsibly, or I've done something, adverse and misbehaved in any way, you know what? I would certainly not argue having you get out. And you know what? I'll even give you the name of my broker, and you can call him directly and complain directly to him and go, hey, this Terry Barnett guy, he's a liar, he's a cheat, he's a thief. Now, just so you know, just because I get a phone call going, and they were very bad, I don't jump to those conclusions. I'm there for you guys. So I'll take what they have to say, and I might ask some pointed questions and look for cases in point. Like if you misled, if you lied, well, they told me this and that, and now some things, because I'm a practicing agent, so I know stuff can go wrong, go awry, whatever. But they would have to prove without a doubt that you acted irresponsibly, that you acted against their best interest, that you misbehaved, and I would definitely let them out. I have the final say in that, so I can let them out unconditionally and wave them on their way. Mind you, that's not my first go-to.
Now, and another side of this is also, keep in mind, if somebody does have a big enough problem with you where you're having this conversation, it's that serious, if it's not just some other agent talking in their ear, because I think we brought that up earlier, but if it's an actual situation where you and the customer do not get along, maybe it's a good thing that they're asking that question, because if it does come up, and it will occasionally over years of doing this business, there will be somebody that either they will need to fire you or you should fire them because not everybody works well together. And so
And that's
just being
true.
prepared for that, being prepared for that conversation is a good thing.
And if the question were to actually come up as a question, you could say, you know what, I get that, sometimes people just don't work well together. I like to think that as we've been working together this far, I've shown you what I'm about. Would you allow me to refer you if you felt uncomfortable working with me? Would that be okay? And that might be something that you could just kind of put off to the side and go, look, I work with, I got 200 other agents on my team. I could refer you to find somebody who's very comfortable working with you, or that you'll be comfortable working with. That's
and we've actually had that. I've actually had that happen before, where we had a family that was just, they were angry, upset, disappointed in the agent that was taking care of them. Unfortunately, a maritime agent, and that she couldn't help what happened. It was just a crazy issue. Just the things that had gotten in the way, and she came to me and she said, she was like, hey, how can we fix this? I was like, well, let me talk to him. We ended up taking over the transaction, making the family happy, just taking care of everything. She still got paid a piece of it because we worked it out like it was a referral. She wanted to make sure that the customer was taken care of, which is the right way to do it. Mm-hmm. And, we had a happy customer when we got done. We literally have 5-star reviews from that family that was angry and mad at the agent and, just wanted to talk bad about us. We were able to turn that around, but we got to be given the opportunity to do that as well. And I would say if you're having if you're in a scary situation with a customer, time to talk to the broker to see if maybe they want to insert somebody else in to help out if it's that bad, rather than having them bad talk you and bad talk the company as well. And we were able to save that one.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Objection 5, I've never had to sign anything like this before. Is this new? Response, yes. And that's important for you guys to know why. It's important for you guys to look back. And by the way, all this background information is on Ameriteam 1 in the forums section. And so you can go down in there. As a matter of fact, I think I was just in there recently. Entire screen.
And just to put this to you, Alan, whatever you decide to do with it, but the course is ready.
So excellent. So the forums here, you go into open forums, and down here there's like tons of discussion forums if you haven't been poking around yet. But right here, I can even put a star on it, bring it up to the top. Buyer agent commission in the shadow of the NAR lawsuit. Everything's in here. Links to news articles, links to NAR, press releases, background. There's a ton of information in here. And what I mean a ton, I mean talking about even breakdown in past conversation we've had past videos with timestamp explanations. As you can see, here's some broken down Q&A that we've developed. As you can see, we've been discussing this for a long time. If this is new to any of you, get your head out of the sand.
Get engaged.
Or an excuse for those people who just moved into Florida from outside. So,
all right.
Okay, Ted. Ted's over here going, yeah, well, okay. And the other thing we did too is we're going to be pointing anybody who hasn't watched those videos yet. I know we've been kind of blasting them out through text and emails, but if you go down here to Ameriteam University, with the courses there. So this is what we taught last week. This was the 2-hour class that we taught. Here's our intro. Here's the class. Some NAR settlement resources we put in there, and a completion certification, which, by the way, all of you are going to be receiving a copy of this at some point, and we need to make sure that when you check and sign the boxes that you have to be truthful. But pretty much it's just making sure that it's giving you a list of resources, and you're going to check and say, yep, I've read the NAR settlement stuff. I've read all of the stuff in the news on this, and I've read all of the MLS frequently asked questions. And I will tell you that if you go to the frequently asked questions section, and it gives you the option at the bottom to print it out, and it gives you this colorized, it's all broken down into sections. I spent a good part of a day reading through this, verifying stuff. Everything, a lot of the questions you guys are asking are in here. How does a listing agent of a property handle direct buyer leads who want to tour their property? They do not require a BBA. And then what can I put in the MLS to show that I'm compensating an agent? Nothing. Nothing. Don't try to sneak it in as a picture in your photos. Don't attach anything. Don't put in little codes. Yeah, no 3.5 pictures of monkeys.
I saw one the other day that said, "Oh, my listing, my aerial photo is ready, and the lawn was mowed in 3%."
3.5%. Yes, I saw that too. And so when you do a listing, there's a section there for compensation. Here's my advice: if the seller is offering concessions, select yes, leave the rest blank.
I agree.
And I'll tell you why, because
100%.
If you put a concession in the listing, you're opening up that concession to be used by the buyer for anything they choose. So I would prefer you put nothing in there. Don't leave it open to guess. Don't put, concessions, 3.5%. No, just don't. Leave it blank. Concessions, yes, make them call you. So I had a good conversation with Marie today in lending. One of the things that I put in this morning, and I'll just bring this up real quick, back into forums, I had been kind of working through this, and one of the things that I put it, what happened? No, where's my open forums? Oh, right here. Wow. Okay. Here we go. Open forum. So one of the things I just put in this morning, most common additional terms in an as-is contract. So
can you show that to us? We don't see your screen right this second.
Sorry, I'm not sharing. I apologize for that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Share screen. Entire and share. All right. Go back to forums. So in the open forum section, I put in this most common additional terms in an as-is contract. So when you're vying for concessions, the question I had, basically, I'm looking at these last three here: closing costs, rate buy downs, and broker compensation. The question I had for Marie, we were talking about lender requirements and what they want to see. Do you want to see all the concessions lumped up? In other words, I'm going to ask for 7.5% concessions from the seller. And it just as an example, those concessions might include closing costs, rate buy down, and buyer broker compensation. Our conclusion was that they really need to be separated so that the lender, all the parties are clear and understand where the monies are going. So you're going to need that document anyway. You might as well just make it as an itemized on your additional terms. So if you're asking the seller for closing costs, seller agrees to credit the buyer up to 3% of purchase price toward closing costs and prepaids. That's a line. Hey, if you're asking the seller to do a rate buy down, seller agrees to credit the buyer up to 2% of the purchase price toward buyer's loan rate buy down.
By the way, guys, this is good stuff. Write this down.
Well, you don't have to write it down. It's right here in the forum.
I'll write this down. Write this down to go back to write this down. It's that important.
And what's really cool is if you guys put stuff in your additional terms normally that you're not seeing here, please go down here and reply to the link and add your input. It would be well received and much appreciated. Buyer broker compensation. Seller agrees to credit the buyer up to 2% of the purchase price toward. These are 3 separate line items. And that way it's clean and clear to everybody where the money's going. And it gives the opportunity for negotiations to say, yeah, the seller's willing to do this, but not that. Or we're going to have to work the numbers out. So, and mind you, if you're going to put in broker compensation, that will have at least been a conversation that you have with the listing agent before you put it in the offer. Do not, so here's that thing that I've kind of harped on because NAR's Code of Ethics 1616 says you can't make a contract contingent upon your commission. In other words, let's say they weren't offering it, but you're writing in the offer and you're putting this, making the whole thing contingent. Now, you will have to have had a conversation with the listing agent that might say, well, the seller may be open to, right? You will have had a conversation because if you go in just blind, then you are at risk of that fine line now that's been drawn and made even finer between that Code of Ethics, Section 1616, and negotiation. That doesn't mean you can't. Just be careful, because if it gets kicked back and the seller says, yeah, I'll cover all of this except for the buyer broker compensation, then, well, that's up to your buyer, and that's a conversation you're going to have with them. But they will be 3 separate line items.
Love it.
All right.
Thank you for that. That's a good tidbit. And it's funny, Alan, because earlier we were in here and we had that little edit we had to make to this document, but I was in the middle of something else. And I'm telling you, after 30 years in this business, and you're still teaching me things. I love it.
Well, it's interesting because the thing I got hung up on when I was talking to Marie was, as a buyer, if I'm a buyer and I'm taking some of my own money and I'm doing a rate buy down, I'm taking my money and buying down based on the loan amount.
Right.
But when you're asking a seller for concessions, everything's based off the purchase price. Or you got an update?
A little follow-up, yeah. Or the appraised value, whichever is lower.
Purchase price or appraised value. So we'll have to add that. If you want to go to that forum and add it as a reply to,
Okay.
that would be wonderful, and we could keep that string going.
Like, forever I got it wrong.
No, you didn't get it wrong. It's correct, and this is also correct, right? So on the purchase price or appraised value. So that's
Nice.
That's the kind of feedback I'm looking for, and that's why we get together in these forums so we can share these ideas. I know we've covered a lot. We've got our hours gone by. What does the agreement actually commit me to? Well, it's pretty much black and white. We're going to work together to help find you a home. It's committing you to me and me to you. It's a 2-way commitment, by the way. I think people need to understand that. I'm committing to you as much as you're committing to me. And so that's the key, right? And it commits both of us together. This is a dual arrangement, just like if it was a listing agreement. It's the same arrangement. I'm concerned. All of these will be in the recording, correct, Terry? These will all be part of.
Yes. Yeah. Do you want this session to be added to the course as well?
Yes, please. Actually, yes.
Yep.
Section 8. I'm concerned about the cost of signing this agreement. Well, it doesn't. Well, all right. First of all, if you're talking about, that's the call I've been waiting for. Oh, God. Anyway, if you're talking about, if you go back to dot loop, no, if you are negotiating a retainer, then there is a cost, right? So if you're negotiating a retainer and there is a cost, then that's kind of the thing. Now, interestingly enough, as I mentioned before, the retainer if you charge a retainer, you need to collect the money up front. This isn't I'm going to charge you this, but I'll collect it at closing kind of deal. You need to collect it up front, and the
Yeah, a retainer is an upfront fee.
Yeah, and it's made to Maritime Realty. If your intention is to credit it at closing, I would put it here under additional fees. Just say, hey, retainer to be returned or credited to the buyer at closing. So you can make it $845. They can write you a check for $845, and we'll hold it in escrow here. We're not going to pay it out to you until the deal's closed or canceled. If you charge a $0 retainer fee, then the cost is nothing to you, because we're going to be looking for homes that are going to be meeting all your needs and making sure that all your concessions are covered. In that rare instance, if we do find a home and they absolutely will not cover the broker's fees, and you decide you want to move forward with the purchase of the home, that is the only circumstance where you'll be required to pay my compensation. And that's just a matter of fact. So that's why the negotiation of the compensation is going to be key. And you've got to make sure that they understand your value to them. It's negotiable. Well, I do not want to pay you 3%. And that's where you begin. I'm looking at a $500,000 house. I'm not paying you $15,000.
All right, so how about
$4,000. I'll pay $4,000. Absolutely.
No, 4%.
Oh, 4. Well, see, and that's how it can go. I'll pay $4,000, sure. And so that's where you might want to have the conversation. It's like, look, the minimum I can go is, 2%. That's still $10,000, or 8 on a $400,000 house. And that might seem like a lot of money to them. And that's the other part of the conversation. It's just, look, that money's not going into my pocket. I got to pay taxes. I got to pay for all the tools I'm using. I pay for classes. I pay for my license. This is a business, and this is how I work. That's not profit for me. Dan.
Yeah. So can you guys hear me?
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Question about, so obviously, let's say the seller doesn't agree to pay the buyer's agent anything. Then at that point, then the buyers are obligated to cover our commission. I understand that. Now, does that come out of their pocket? Like, is that out of the buyer's pocket, or can that come out of the can that come out of closing, like from the net proceeds?
So I spoke to Barbara over at Equitable Title, and I know she can't speak for all titles, but she's spoken to her. As you know, it's attorney run, and they're driven by their underwriters. And
Okay.
so when we submit the package to, we're under contract. They're not budging, and they're not going to pay the 2.5% I negotiated with my buyer. You're going to also provide them with your buyer broker agreement, just like you would if if the seller paid for something and something needed
Transaction
to come up.
coordinator.
Yeah. So if the transaction coordinators are paid out of it, they're paid out of the commission usually, but
Depends.
I guess my question was,
improvement. But I guess my point, yes, to answer to your question, you would provide that to the title company. The title company is going to put that cash to close due by the buyer, and that's going to be on the HUD.
It's
Right.
Invoice. Yeah.
All this should be determined at the very beginning anyway. I mean, this shouldn't come up like a week before closing, but I guess it can. But I guess my question really is, how, like to your point, it's the buyer that really pays for the commission anyway, because that money is coming from the buyer. but at the same time, it's coming from the lender, right? The lender's
Well,
providing
the funds.
the means to purchase the property and the transaction. But so my question is, can this come out of the loan as well?
No. Right now, and Marie, correct me if I'm wrong, right now you cannot finance the buyer broker agreement. No. Now,
Okay.
so, what we've done in the past with offers, and this is why it's important to do your comparables. What we've done in the past with offers for concessions, it's easier to do with 3%, right? I'm going to offer 3% more than what you're asking for, and I'm going to ask for you to give me that 3% back. Now you got an extra 2.5%, 3% on top of that. So now you're asking for the seller to kick back 6%. So maybe you're offering 3% more and asking for 6% back. You know what I'm saying? You might be able to work it into the price you're paying for the home, as long as the home, as we all know, as long as that home appraises. Thank you.
Yeah.
The home has to appraise. You can offer 5% more. You can offer 50% more, but if the home doesn't appraise, it's not going to work. So, but that's your wiggle room right there.
I guess it doesn't make sense because in the past, the commissions were, they were kind of factored into the purchase price, obviously, right? The loan to value, all that's factored into the loan.
Mm-hmm.
So that includes paying for the commissions, like all the commissions. So if that was the case in the past, why can't that be so now? Because it's essentially the same thing.
It's not really. It's when monies are transferred from the lender, it's X amount of dollars to the seller, and then the seller, what we're doing is it's X amount of dollars is going to the seller, and then the seller is agreeing out of that. This is my purchase price.
Okay.
This is how much money I
got
want,
it.
and I'm agreeing to kick some of that back. The lender will let me kick some of that back to the buyer to help pay for closing costs and prepays. The lender will also allow me to kick some of that back to cover the brokers. So in that sense, you can roll it into the loan.
You're right. Okay.
In that sense,
there is logic to what Dan was saying, though. Is the seller and or the listing broker would have been collecting potentially more money before because they were sharing a co-broke. Now they're not, and so the buyer agent gets kicked over to the side as far as, hey, since it's not going to be counted in the loan like we're talking about,
Right.
and so that creates its own challenges, which I think whenever sellers become buyers again and then realize what they've done to themselves, they'll be pretty surprised about that.
sure.
So because representation, oh, you mean I have to pay for it? It's harder for me to get my loan because I have to, yeah. So I think we're going to see some of that. Right now, we have to deal with the current situation, though, and the current situation is that it's a separate item now that's been pushed over to the buyer side, which the current lenders, get yourself together, are not counting that as part of the equation.
Correct. So when we talk about seller concessions, technically we're talking about kickbacks. Seller's taking all this money in from the loan, and then, the lender's saying, yep, you can give some of it back to the buyer for this. You can give some of it back to the buyer for that. And you know what? You can even give some of the money back to the buyer for these three reasons. And but they have to be separate. And they are technically they're kickbacks. We used to call them commissions. Now it's compensation. Fee, things of that sort. But these are the conversations. And by the way, anybody here who's going to be on the listing side of it, these are the conversations we're going to have with our sellers. Hey, in order to bring the best deal to the table, we really don't want to cut this part out. I know what you've read on the news, but it really doesn't buy you anything. And in the end, we're going to have to negotiate something anyway.
Yeah, you're going to be dealing with a smaller buyer pool because of that.
Exactly. All right. And we've got all these others in here. So these will all be part. These will all be part of what's going to be added to our university, and that you can add to your repertoire and make you guys fully prepared. And by the way, just like I said, go onto the NAR, go onto the MLS, and print out this frequently asked question list. Read it before you go to bed, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. You'll be educated for sure, and you'll have no problem falling asleep.
Looks like Mike has a question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I'm talking from Tripoli, Libya. My question is, during a seller's market, would you sign exclusive buyer agreement with more than one buyer?
Wait, what?
Like, let's say the two buyers like the same house, and since you have an agreement with them to represent each one of them exclusively, how would you go about representing them?
Well, you have to have a buyer broker agreement in place. Use the transaction broker one, right? Don't use don't use the single agent one. Use the one that's in .loop. And remember, we represent the transaction. We don't represent the individual. So you can write offers for each one, and you can let the other know that, hey, by the way, Mr. Jones, I have another buyer who's interested in the same piece of property. So if you're going to write an offer, I can't share you what his offer is going to be, and I won't do it the other way around. But I am certainly, if you want to write an offer, make it good. Usually, this doesn't change. Most sellers want to see highest and best. So if you've got an individual that's going in and they want to lowball it, and it's nothing wrong with letting them know that this is a multiple offer situation. So if you really want it, I would offer my highest and best. You don't have to let them know you're representing somebody else. You can let them know it's a multiple offer situation. You do not have to. It's your business. I ran a business for 16 years, and my customers never met each other. When I was talking to you, you were my customer. When I was talking to him, he was my customer. And, that was it. Now, if you're really uncomfortable with that, if you got somebody you're working closely with, you could do it as a referral and have them, work separately. I've only done that with listings, where, I've got both sides of the listings. Terry and I used to partner up. We were partners at the beginning, and before I left to sell timeshare and screwed everything up. But when we worked together on a listing and we got a buyer, we would just make them feel comfortable. It's like, okay, Terry, you handle that. I'll write the offer and work with the buyers, and we'll meet in the middle. It worked out fantastic. It's a little bit different if you're one guy working with two buyers for the same property, but let them know it's a multiple offer situation. Put in your best offer. That's it.
Mm-hmm. And if he asks you for a recommendation, what kind of offer he can put?
Highest and best. You can let them know that, hey, I ran comparables on this home. The home is valued at or around this price. So you might want to come in close.
Okay. And if it happens they offer the same price?
Then the seller has to select one. Because remember, it's not all about price. It's about escrow. Maybe one's putting down more escrow than the other, or the other one's willing to close in 20 days, and this other one's, he's going to close in 45 days, or they want 15 days for inspection, and the other one's asking for 3. So there's a lot of parts to a contract that can make it variable enough where a seller could make a decision and go, yeah, I like this one, and then the seller makes the decision based on the facts of the contract.
Okay, thank you.
And if you have that problem, God bless you.
Yeah.
Make sure if you got two buyers vying for the same property, make sure you get multiple properties to choose from. So, hey, if this one doesn't work out, I got this one over here. This is plan B. And then that, one's doing plan A, one's doing plan B. You're good to go.
Good.
All right. All right, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. And we had a good showing. Some people had to bow out, and but we covered a lot in here. And I hope you found it. Helpful.
Thank you.
Thank
yeah,
you.
we'll have more, definitely. Take care,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you, Alan.
You're welcome.
Thank you.